Hello, welcome to Author Hour. I'm your host, Richard Lyntton, author of North Korea Deception and Hyde Park Deception, international spy thrillers. Today, we have the inimitable, the legendary, the one and only Ken Kalfus, and he has graciously accepted this second invitation to visit us on Author Hour. His new novel, 2 a.m. in Little America, was published in May 2022, and he is the author of 3 previous novels, including A Disorder Peculiar to the Country, which was a finalist for the National Book Award. He's also published 3 collections of short stories and lives in Center City, Philadelphia. Ken, great to see you again.
Great to see you too.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
coming
Thanks for having me. Yeah.
How are you?
Pleasure to come out here. Yeah.
It's been almost a year.
Has it been that long?
I think it was June you came.
Maybe it was. Yeah, it was a very hot day.
We told people that your book was going to be coming out in May 2022. So here we are.
Here it is.
I have to, for as a little treat for those who watched the last episode, and you can look it up. The first interview we didn't have time at the very end to ask. I didn't have time to ask you a question about cinematography and how that. And why you use that in your very first book, your
first novel, yeah.
Your first novel. Can you just clear that up before we move on?
Sure. Now, that first novel is titled The Commissariat of Enlightenment, and it's set in Russia in the years early 20th century, between the time of Tolstoy's death and Lenin's death. So those difficult years in the teens, and it's about the first discovery, the use of photojournalism,
right,
of film journalism,
yep,
for propaganda purposes. And for me, that was very interesting. For me, it was the beginning of that moment in our history,
yep,
where audiences around the world could see in motion,
yep,
live news events,
okay,
and have those live news events manipulated.
And I found that fascinating too. That's A Commissariat of Enlightenment.
Right, yes.
If you're interested in Russia, well, it's a great book anyway, but if you're interested, it's this pre-revolutionary Russia, right?
Right.
Pre-Lenin.
And then the revolution itself.
And then the revolution,
my main character is is an assistant for the Ministry of Propaganda, basically, right. And he helps change film in order to give the masses the public, right, the government line,
okay,
basically.
So I want people, if you don't know Ken, I want people to get a quick sense of sort of who you are. So I'm going to just give you some quick fire questions.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. I'll give you quick fire answers.
Yeah, and that's what I meant. I need to quick fire answers. So where are you from?
New York originally.
New York City.
New York City, and then I grew up in Long Island.
Okay. What did your parents do? What professions?
My father had a shoe store.
Okay.
And my mother had some various jobs. Yeah.
And what kind of high school did you go to?
A public high school in Long Island.
Public high school.
Yeah.
And something I didn't pick up on in the last interview, you actually said that you said you dropped out of college, and I thought, oh, I can't believe I didn't ask him, why did you drop out of college? Because you weren't really there that long.
No.
and I love these questions because I feel like so many successful people dropped out of college. So why did you drop out of college? Do you remember?
Yeah, of course I remember. I had very strong feelings about the institutionalization of education. I felt it should be something actually personal, should be something self-directed. I guess I also want some adventure. I went to Europe.
Wow.
And I don't, I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry I left school, but I'm proud my daughter finished.
Right.
So, I don't necessarily advise people to do that. It's just at the time I felt that there's things I wanted to learn about. I wanted to write.
Yeah.
And I actually do think that college is probably the worst place to do writing because you have other things to do. And I worked on the school newspaper there, and that was a big, I think the most important thing about my college career, abbreviated as was, is I worked on the school newspaper. And I strongly always advise when I meet young people who go to college, who want to become writers, they work on the school newspaper.
Right.
That's how you get experience writing for an audience, writing on deadline, being edited.
Okay.
And that was pretty key for me.
So then how did you how did you use your sort of love and passion of writing? Were you a journalist, or like how did that morph into writing books?
I was a journalist and an editor and a freelance writer. I did various things. You know, it was a bumpy career, a bumpy life. I mean, I say my first book, my book of short stories. I've been publishing short stories all along.
Yeah.
In various literary, various literary magazines.
Yeah.
But my first book was published I was 44 years old.
Right.
So it took some time.
Exactly.
Some time, yeah.
And that's what I want people to know. Like it takes time. What would you say to? And again, normally I ask these kind of questions at the end, but there's no reason why we shouldn't start with them. What? So you've talked about writing for a school newspaper. What if you're older, in your years, you've got a job or you've started writing, you are a traditionally published author, literary author, writer, and so you've gone a certain track, but you can still give some advice, I'm sure, someone out there who wants to write. How did Ken Kalfus write 2 a.m. in Little America? Like when do you do it? How do you do it? Can you give us some tips for people who want to write?
Well, people who want, I write every day. That's my job. How
many hours?
I don't count them, but I get up in the morning, I go to my computer, turn it on.
Yeah.
I write, other things may happen in the course of the day, of course, that's what I do. The people who have other obligations, I would say, well, you can still write. You're going to have less time to write.
Yeah.
And the key thing is not to think of your writing schedule as how much you write. People say, write every day, write every day. Right. You can't, because you're going to have life.
Stuff happens.
Well, you have important obligations to work, to family, to being whatever you have to do. But you can write every week. Mm-hmm. You can say to yourself, I'm going to write a certain amount of time or get a certain amount of words done in the course of a week.
Okay.
And that means that means giving up certain things like you will have to make some sacrifices, but your family is important. You have a job, that's important, but you can find time to write. And the other important thing is to read. Read seriously, read critically, read not only novels but important magazines like the New Yorker, obviously, but also literary quarterlies. And I think the writing life is also the reading life. So you have to have some sort of determination to make that part of your life. And it's not just writing when you feel like it either. I write every day whether I'm in the mood or not.
Right.
You have to write no matter what happens in the week. Try to find if it's 5 hours or 6 hours. Count them if you have to. You can write 500 words or 1,000 words. Count them if you have to. The point is, do it and do it like that, and be, and be conscious of that. That's what you're set out to do.
Someone like you who is, a national, if not international, literary sort of author figure, speak to the fact that, it's still, I don't want to say torture, but you still got to be so disciplined. And it's like I feel like when you're successful at something, people forget that it's still really, really hard work. How hard? Like, what kind of discipline do you think it needs to write a novel?
Turn off your internet.
Say again?
Turn off your internet.
Okay.
That's when I write. I turn off my internet.
You literally switch it off.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And that's the first thing. And then the second, the sense of purpose. We all have lives that require some discipline. Whatever they are. Our jobs are. So I think take it as something serious.
Okay.
So, but I would say the most important thing is, the first thing I'd say is turn off the internet.
That's interesting you say that. I found a new spot to write by a river, and there's no signal, so I can't go on my phone or internet.
That's good. That's
and it really works. You're absolutely right.
You bring your laptop.
Yeah, I bring my laptop and sit in the car, and it's just heaven because you hear the river.
Okay, well,
and
that really works.
Yeah, it really works. Like it's been a couple of hours. I try and get a chapter a day.
So that's a lot. If you get a couple of hours in,
mine are short chapters.
Yeah, well, either way,
commercial fiction.
You get a couple of hours in, and and the other thing is, the way I work, and because everyone works the same, is that first draft.
Yeah.
I consider it a vomit a vomit draft.
Wow.
And I don't, I mean, I get those words up on the screen.
Okay.
But I know, I get through it by saying, this is crap, this is crap, this is crap. And there's only many, and also the other thing I do when I write, and this also may be useful to your listeners, is I don't go back to the beginning and reread it. I get to the end. Now, I have also little games I play as well. Yeah. But the key thing is get to the end.
Of the novel, of the manuscript.
Yeah, the manuscript. And then when you reread it, you're rereading that first draft, first vomit draft, which is going to be crap.
Yep.
You read it with fresh eyes.
Wow.
And then I read the whole thing through and make notes. Write myself a letter, a very kind letter, that says, what I like as a friend, like what's good about the book, what's not working. I'm gentle. I'll say, Ken Kalfus, you idiot, you're not going to write anything ever again. But I try to address myself.
So you read the manuscript back to yourself. I mean, you read the manuscript, and then once you've read the manuscript, you write yourself that letter.
Yes.
And how long is the letter?
Usually about a screen and a half.
Wow.
A couple page or two.
So what does that do?
That allows me to see the book from a distance. Mm-hmm. It allows me to look, I mean, it's very easy to fix sentences. Sure. Fixing the major things that are wrong with the book, the things that are the global issues that in the vomit draft, because you go writing so fast, you just say, okay, I'm not sure this is going to work, but I'm gonna get through it. That's how you address them, and then I try again, step back and figure out be specific about what I need to do to make it better. And I will do this process of going through it, writing a letter, going through it, writing a letter several times before I'm even thinking. I mean, I'm always thinking about language, but when I read it, I'm not looking at language. I'm looking at what's the story, what's important, what I'm trying to communicate, what kind of effect I'm trying to create, the global issues of the book. Mm-hmm. Global in the sense the book as a whole.
Big picture.
Big picture of the book, yeah.
And just to be clear, you literally write a chapter, 3 or 5 or 10 pages, whatever that is for you, but you just move straight on. You simply don't go back and reread what you wrote yesterday.
Yesterday, I'll go back and reread what I wrote yesterday.
Yep.
But I won't go back and reread what I read last week.
Got it.
I mean, I have a couple of. I mean, I always rewrite yesterday's work.
Yep.
And then I move forward.
Okay.
So you move forward, and then next day you read today's work, and then and
that's very helpful.
And you just move forward with it. I have a lot of little games I play with myself. Can you
give us an example?
Well, I do actually go back. I do. It's important.
You dip back in somewhere?
Well, I will cut off a certain section and I'll just reread it. The point is, because sometimes what inspires you is your own language. Mm-hmm. So, but I don't go back and rewrite stuff over and over and over again.
Yeah.
I don't do that. I do that at the end of each draft. That's the important thing I want to communicate to you and to your viewers.
Do you have a premise, like a 1-sentence premise of a book?
Oh no, I have notes. I'll fill up notes, screens and screens and screens of notes before I begin writing.
Okay.
I mean, with scenes, with the idea of it, with what I call one screen synopsis, with a longer outline. No, I will do a lot of, before I even commit to the book, I'll do a lot of groundwork.
But I guess what I meant by that wasn't clear. What I meant was I find it also, apart from the notes and the scenes and the drafts, I find it useful to have why am I writing this book? Like, what is the one sentence or couple of sentences, and what I call the premise, that you have to be so, fired up and passionate about, because you got to get excited by your own work, right?
Right.
Is that true? I'm just.
Yeah, I think it is true, and that maybe can be my first bit in my first screen.
Yeah.
Whenever I first started writing notes, when I first had that idea.
Yeah.
I try to get that premise.
Okay.
I guess I try to get the what it is, why I want to write it. At some point, several times in the course of working on a book, I have to ask myself, why do I want to write this?
Yeah,
it's for
do
sure.
Do you find, I mean, you said it's a vomit draft, but do you get, because I find recently, like, occasionally I get excited by the story, and I think to myself, yes, I like this, I'm going to keep going, so for me, it's important to get excited by my own story. You talk about a vomit draft, but that doesn't mean that you're not into your story, right?
I am. It's mostly, when I say excited about, when I say my vomit draft, the things that I'm most vomitatious about it is
renditions of vomit here.
Is the language, is scenes that don't express what I wanted them to express.
Yeah.
Plot elements that may not be part of what I'm trying to write. I mean, but the words on the page do get me excited.
Yep.
And the idea, I usually don't run out of interest in the book. Usually, unless I'm stuck. But I usually commit to write a full first draft. So. Do
you know how many scenes are in that draft, or how many chapters, or it's finished when it's finished?
Oh no, I know where I'm going with it.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, someone, which is E.L. Doctorow, once said that writing a novel is like driving across country. Like in a short story, you can see the short story as a whole.
Yeah.
When you write a novel, you really can't see it as a whole. But you might see where you're going with it. And he once described writing a novel as like driving cross country in the dark without headlights.
Oh my goodness.
But you're going to California. You're going to California. So that's where that's sort of how I.
That's great.
Do but usually I know where it's going to end up.
And would you say,
and how to get there is the hard part. Yeah.
Right. And would you say, because I don't think you didn't study writing, am I correct? You didn't actually study.
I took a couple of classes when I was in college.
But I mean, obviously you have such a wealth of knowledge because you're a writer, but I'm just wondering, for people starting out.
Most because I'm a reader.
Okay, right, I was going to say, so that's the main point.
The main thing is reading. Reading is an integral part of my life.
Yeah.
And I try to read good books. Mm-hmm. I try to be careful when I'm reading. I try to think what they're about.
Do you just read literary fiction, or
no?
I
read nonfiction too.
Yeah.
I don't read much commercial fiction.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you mean. I mean, it's important. Like, I can tell you what I'm reading right now. I can tell you what I'm going to read next.
What are you reading right now?
I mentioned I'm reading this book, a nonfiction book of history of relations between the United States, between the West and Russia, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, and how various decisions like NATO expansion, but also the Russian war in Chechnya, led to this new Cold War we have now, and of course the tragedy in Ukraine.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I want to get onto that, but let's just, so I wanted to just read out a couple of things from your website. So your 2 a.m. in Little America is an Esquire Best Book Award 2022. It is a Publishers Weekly Best Book of Summer 2022. Kirkus Review Best Book of May 22, and a San Francisco Chronicle Most Anticipated Novel of 22. So that's incredible. So why don't we start? And why don't you just read a little bit?
Okay, sure. I'm just going to read like a paragraph. Yeah. Are you going to hear the sound of my voice?
Yeah.
So the novel, I just to say this novel is set in a world that's hopefully fantastic, fantasy, hopefully, when political violence in our country has forced a lot of young Americans especially, to leave the country into a world, and they're impoverished. They're not like our current expats. They're basically migrants in a world that no longer cares about them. So I'm just going to read about, it's the middle of the book, about one such migrant's journey outside America. In my next country of residence, no one believed I was a tourist. Not at the airport when I arrived, nor when I looked for places to live and work. It was hard to find work, and then once I did, in a food processing plant, I overstayed my visa until I couldn't any longer. Further crackdowns were coming. I went to another country, and then another after that. each move a last-minute escape from a looming migrant center or prison. One desert border was crossed on foot by a dozen other undocumented travelers of diverse origins, led by smugglers who did not know the way as well as advertised. The noonday frigidity broke records, yet in its lack of relief, its desolation, its stillness, and its boundless, cloudless, birdless sky, the desert was a place of strange and absolute beauty. Every one of the desperate migrants was aware of this beauty, this gorgeousness, this transcendence, this manifestation of perfect harmony, as if it were a discrete, substantial item. Its appreciation, the full purpose of human existence, even as we suffered for it. We continued on, watching our steps. Night fell, the cold like a blade slicing through every inch of our exposed skin, and a family with an elderly parent had to be left behind, still drinking in the beauty.
Wonderful, wonderful, lovely.
There's an element of irony in this novel, as in all my work.
So can you, I tried to describe, your book, and I thought, I'm just going to ask Ken to, can you just tell us again, like for people who don't know you or your work, like what is this book about? And then also tell us, please, how and why it came about and when you started writing this book.
Okay. So this book is set in the future, but not very far in the future. There's no technology, there's no science fiction stuff there.
Okay.
When things that could happen in this country, like the January 6th insurrection, have continued to happen, and there's civil disorder, civil war, let's say.
So kind of worse than the insurrection sort of thing.
Worse, but in that kind of category, and the level of political violence in this country has gotten worse.
And I want to just...
But I don't specify what it is.
Sure. Yeah, I noticed you're not partisan, are you, in your writing and in this book? But what I do want to ask you real quick is because presumably you'd finished the book or was nearly finished before the insurrection.
Yeah,
right?
I was.
So I just wanted to... I don't want to go off tangent, but did you just... did you see stuff like that coming?
I think we all saw stuff like that coming. Right. I think we all saw stuff that we also divisions in our society that are so deep that are based on different readings of what we think are objective fact.
Yeah.
And I guess my real inspiration for this was I spent a year in Yugoslavia during the first year of the Civil War, and I love that country. Yugoslavia was a great country,
Me too.
full of smart, intellectual, kind people who then tore literate, which is always an important thing for me.
Yeah.
But just tore each other, and they tore each other apart.
Yeah.
And it was tragic. And there's no reason. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily inevitable that would happen in our country. Mm-hmm. But there's no reason to think we're immune to it, and no reason to think that couldn't happen. So what interests me most about this whole situation, yes, there's partisan sides, and we all, we're on one side, the other side. What interests me most about our situation and the Yugoslav situation is the argument. You meet people sometimes, good people, kind people, mm-hmm. Who take a political view different, maybe even in our own family, sure. Who take not only a different political position, but have a different reading of objective fact. I mean, right. We do know as objective fact that the 2020 election was not stolen.
Right.
But a large proportion of Americans believe it was.
Yeah.
So what I'm interested in is not arguing that, litigating that. What I'm interested in is what does it do to our minds, to our to our sense of reality, mm-hmm. We encounter this defiance of what we think the objective fact. It really makes us all a little deranged. And the characters in my novel all suffer this kind of derangement, I guess.
Do you feel that phenomena that you just talked about is a new thing? Because I feel like it's a newer thing, and even though we live in the most transparent world we've ever lived in, and we're living in the US of A,
Yes.
it's like somehow it's made it worse.
Okay, so it is the phenomenon is not a new thing, and this is something this is an idea that runs through several of my books. That, aside from the book you mentioned, the Homicide of Enlightenment, that the intensity of mass media, particularly visual mass media, has created these almost impregnable bubbles. And in Yugoslavia, the low state TV that was churning out wasn't propaganda so much as inflammatory. It was inflammatory, okay, in the same way that that Fox News, for example, might do, just like that, really. I think the intensity of our media environment, the saturation, our saturation in a media environment, now social media as well, has made that disassociation from each other, that derangement, worse, or intensified it.
Right.
So yes, and I several of my books are about times we live in. My book, A Disorder Peculiar to the Country, is about that moment in our history after 9/11, where it's about a couple who are in the middle of this terrible divorce in New York, and on the morning of September 11th, he goes to work in the World Trade Center. She goes to catch flight 93.
Oh my goodness!
He's late for work. She misses a plane. They both survive, but they don't know it, and they both secretly think the other one's dead. They both think the other one's dead, and they're secretly thrilled.
Oh wow!
But
I love it.
But the novel follows them through the next several years of the 21st century, and what I've tried to express there is the way that our public lives and our public life in general has infiltrated our private life. We can't. I mean, I come down in the morning. My wife and I, during the Trump administration, all we could talk about was Trump. Politics, and politics, and just what's happened, latest atrocity, and the political has become intimately involved with our personal imagination. Yeah. And so this book is sort of like has lineage with those two previous novels.
We're going to talk a little bit more after the show. We're going to carry on, but what have you got coming up? Have you got an idea for the next book?
I'm working on another novel. Yeah. I say, this is my job, so
finishes.
So I'm nearing the end of a new vomit draft, but I don't know whether I still have to write the letter. I still have to think of it as viable. We'll see what happens.
How long did you, again, just a couple of quick fire, how long did it take you to write that first draft?
This one?
Yeah.
I would say it's like 5 months, which is very fast for me. And it sucks.
Okay. And what, is it inspired, is it a completely different story to this one?
Yes.
So that story, that premise, that idea, has it been something that's been fermenting for a while, or did you just come up with it?
No. My ideas tend to bounce around for years, decades even. I mean, my first the book Homicide of Enlightenment took 20 years to write it.
Oh wow!
And my third novel, Equilateral, also about 20 years.
Right.
So yeah, things intensify. I pick up string. I have a thought here, a thought there. Yeah, even before I set down the first page.
Okay, great. Right. Well, I think we're gonna wrap it up. But like I say, we are gonna carry on and have a little bit more of a chat about the war, the Ukraine-Russian war. Thank you so much for joining Ken Kalfus, for joining us, Ken, and for being our first author to join us for a second time on Author Hour. You can find out more about Ken's work at www.kenkalfus. That's KenKalfus. KenKalfus, kenkalfus.com. You can find 2 a.m. in Little America at bookshop.org, or on Amazon and other books.
Or in your local bookstore.
Or in your local bookstore, Mainline Books.
Main Point Books.
Main Point Books. Main Point Books.
And they've copies. They've stopped over there before.
And they're going to be signed copies there, so you'll write a few more there. And finally, if you didn't know, this year is Queen Elizabeth's II's Platinum Jubilee celebration, which means the Queen has been on the royal throne for 70 years. And so check out, this is my first job as a publisher. It's a memoir of my great aunt Florence Bramford, who served in the British royal household for 30 years under 2 Queen Elizabeths. The book is called From Cottage to Palace and is also available on Amazon. And if you want to just spend a little bit more time with Ken and I, we'll see you on YouTube.